I would like to call this meeting of the Public Schools of Robeson County of the Board of Education on September the 10th, 2024. First of all, we have a moment of silence, but before we have a moment of silence, please remember Mr. Lois Oxidon, retired. She worked as assistant principal and retired EC teacher, also a student at Lumberton High School, Austin Emmanuel. Please remember the family. Can we have a moment of silence? All right. Thank you. Now we have the Pledge of Allegiance by Peterson Elementary School.
Mr. Chairman, if we may, before they come and do the Pledge of Allegiance, may we be mindful of tomorrow, 9/11. It's been 23 years, almost 3,000 lives that was lost in that. So again, let's keep the families in remembrance of 9/11 and those that serve, please.
Thank you. Okay, please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can they give us their names, please, before they leave, please?
I'm Kennedy Navarrete. Tali McQuay. Kelly King. Landon Peavy. Taya Richardson.
Ayana Ellison.
Caden Richardson.
Thank you. All right. Do we have adoption of the agenda? Okay. It's been the adoption of the agenda. A motion been made by Mr. Henry Brewer, second being by Ms. Melissa Ocean. All in favor? All opposed? Approval of the open session minutes. We have a motion by Mr. Crystal Monroe, a second by Mr. Henry Brewer. All in favor? All opposed? First on the agenda, we have information items, and we have recognition of Lumberton FFA chapter top break. Okay, hold on. Before we do that, we have, sorry, Dr. Emmanuel.
Okay, I just wanted to ask the superintendent if they would reschedule those children to come back that won those Beta Club awards that were not able to be present when school was out.
We will take care of that in our October meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Emmanuel. So, you do it, okay? We're gonna have the recognition by Dr. Wendy Carr.
Good evening, Chairman Leach, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. Tonight, we'd like to recognize the local FFA Lumberton chapter, Robeson County FFA chapters represented well at the NCFFA convention, with chapters bringing home several awards and the Lumberton FFA chapter being named the top chapter in the state. So what I'd like to do is ask all the board members to come up and the FFA chapter. Afterwards? Yes, okay, no problem. You want to give it to her and I'll read it. Do you guys want to give it to her? Recognition. The public schools of Robeson County would like to present to the Lumberton FFA chapter in recognition of your achievement and prestigious distinction as the top Future Farmers of America chapter in the state of North Carolina. The public schools of Robeson County congratulate you. The public schools of Robeson County congratulates you on this distinguished honor. Your outstanding academic achievements, leadership, commitment to agricultural education, and the positive influence you have made on both your community and state are to be commended. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. How are you? Come on, get in the picture. Get
In the picture, what the kids got?
Want to get in front of the podium?
in front of the podium. Yes, in front of the podium. Come on in front.
Let the children get.
Where we go? Come on. Come on. Come on, son.
Come on, guys, I took it back. Come on. Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations. Anybody want to speak?
Yes, can we ask the chapter president to speak? Thank you. You ready?
That's you get that.
My name is Brittlin Stubbs, and I'm currently serving as this year's Lumberton FFA chapter president. And here with me are my 4 fellow officers and 2 of my advisors. We just want to thank all y'all for your support. We want to thank our principal, Mr. Brooks, for supporting us 100% and being our biggest cheerleader. I wanted to thank Dr. Locklear and our superintendent, Mr. Williamson, for always supporting our program. And we want to thank our school board members for always advocating for our members in our chapter. Without this, this award would not be possible. So we just want to thank you all.
Congratulations.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say that I am an official FFA member. Okay, I've been to Kansas City, had the blue jacket, once FFA, always.
I know, but did you ever finish in the top?
No.
Good job. Hey, next we will have the 10-day membership by Mr. Bobby Locklear.
Good evening, Chairman Leach, Superintendent Williamson, board members. As you're well aware, we just completed our 10th day in school for this school year, and we wanted to share those numbers with you. I've placed this at your desk. It was not in the packet because yesterday was our 10th day. On the 10th day of school, we ended at 20,373 students. This is down about 126 students from where we're at this point last year. So there are several reasons as to why we're at our 248 in terms of no-shows. One of the things several things have led to this, but our staff has worked hard to identify and find all of these children. As you're aware, the state is converting our student information system from Power School to Infinite Campus. And so that does lead in a breakdown from student records transferring from one district to the other. A number of our students, we believe, are currently out of the country. We're still waiting on records requests for students to come in, and we have several students that are currently decided to do homeschooling. Until they are able to produce a homeschool card for us, they're going to be considered a no-show. But we did want to share this information with you, and Miss Erica can reiterate this. The 10th day is not used to calculate our funding. It is the best one of two that we will get funded on. And I'll take any questions or comments you may have.
Mr. Henry?
Mr. Bobby, looking at this cheat sheet you got here briefly, it looks like the reflection is, just for the general public that doesn't have one, looks like the most of our less enrollment is in our high schools. Is that correct?
And that will be correct, and that will be correct for every year. The majority of our no-shows are going to occur at the high school level.
Do we have any reason of doubt as to why?
Yes, that would be the grade levels in which most of our students decide to drop out, and they make that decision over the summer not to come back.
Dr. Emmanuel?
And my question is tagged to Mr. Henry's. Is this the time that we can start with our dropout prevention efforts?
Right, so those have been ongoing. As you can recall, we spent a lot of time and effort over the summer through our YDS, school social workers working through McKinney-Vento to search for children over the summer as well. But our student support staff, school social workers, counselors, YDS are still constantly searching for children.
And we'll continue on.
And we'll continue. We're just not stopping because it's the end of the 10th day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby.
Yes.
Now we will have the school safety and crisis plan by Mr. Bobby and Ms. Jessica Seeley.
Yes. Good evening again. So as you are aware, every year we require all of our schools to complete a crisis plan. Last school year, through the efforts of Ms. Jessica and other folks, we were able to create a district-wide crisis plan. That plan was shared with all schools. It was also shared with law enforcement and emergency personnel across the county. Schools are in the process of finalizing their school crisis plans now. 2 steps to that would be they are also required to complete a school crisis plan and school emergency plan, and also enter that into the school risk management program that is accessible to law enforcement across the state. So our schools are busy planning and preparing, and hope we never have to utilize one of the plans, but they are prepared in the case we do have an emergency on campus.
Mr. Curry?
Mr. Bobby, we know we have the fire drills and tornado drills as such. Now, are they required sometime beginning of the year to go through a crisis situation at their school?
We do not have a set timeline for them to go through a crisis. Last year, we required all of our schools to do a mock lockdown during a specific week. And based on legislation that passed last year, beginning in January, we are required to have a tabletop exercise at all of our schools. Mm-hmm. But we will continue moving forward with them practicing and constantly revisiting the plans, mm-hmm. which is what we shared with them at our administrators retreat back in the summer.
And I think the tabletop's a lot of work, but now the mock lockdown, to me, as soon as they can go through those situations, I think would be good, especially starting school.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Next, we will have teacher read aloud by Wendy Dorsey Carr, Ms. Deborah Dallas.
Good evening, Chairman Leach, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. This evening, we did want to share with you a new test feature that NCDPI will be allowing us to use this year during our end of grade testing. It is the teacher read aloud. And it is basically an accessibility support that will be available for all students during our math and science end of grade testing. This test feature is approved by the annual testing program for use, like I said, during math and science administration for all of our students. So unlike a test accommodation that we've had with our IEPs, our 504s, or the LIEP, where it was required to be written in their plan to have read aloud, this test feature will allow all of our students to receive read aloud during their math and their science end of grade assessments. So on the slide, we tried to break down the difference between a test feature and an accommodation. So the test feature will be on demand. So basically a student will be taking the assessment. If they want to hear something read aloud to them, they will have the control to hit that, right? So it does not have to be on for them at all times. They will have the control of when they want to hear something read to them and when they do not. Okay, it is available for all students and it applies for math and science only. Now, an accommodation is required by an IEP, a 504, and the LIEP, right? So our EC students will still have that in their IEP. And that's best practice because we want that to follow. That's a federal document that follows them regardless where they go. That would be a testing accommodation for them. It's applied to math and science as specified by the plan. They must use it. During a testing accommodation, they have to use it. So test feature, I can use it as I need it. The accommodation would be we make students use that because it's documented in their IEP. During the test accommodation, they would have to monitor that use and they would have to document that it was being utilized. For a test feature, students will be able to use it as they want during the assessment. The one caveat is they want to make sure that our students use it throughout the year, right? If we're going to have that as an option for the end of grade, we want to make sure that they're comfortable with that. They know when they want to hear certain words, and it actually doesn't become a hindrance for some students. So on the next slide, these are all the programs that we currently have that actually already have that feature built in. So our students, when they're in ClassWorks, they actually can click a speaker and they can hear things read to them if they want. Same with our Eureka Math, SchoolNet when they take assessments, those can be read to them. Canvas, when students go into that platform, it can be read to them. Our check-ins that we take 3 times a year, and then we know that we have a Google feature. So we feel very comfortable and confident that our students will have practice with that throughout the year, so that when they do use it for our assessments and our end of grade, they'll be very comfortable and they'll be able to manage that when they want to use it. Okay, questions about the teacher read aloud? Okay.
Ms. Christie Fields?
So how are we ensuring that the teachers have support set in place so that this read aloud feature can be implemented and not add to their workload?
So most of it is already features like ClassWorks is a program we already use daily. So all that has to happen is just a flip of the switch in order to make that happen. So we're going to meet with our principals on the 19th and talk through it again. We've already met with all of our principals who were really on board with the idea. But like you said, now we want to make sure that our teachers feel comfortable. But most of those, it's really a matter of just turning it on and teaching students how to use it.
But it also said it had to be monitored, so. how
Right
do you
now, that's on
monitor
the IEP side.
Okay.
Right, yep. Good question, thank you.
Mrs. Terry?
So, excuse me, so within Canvas, what portions of Canvas are we saying that is available for the read aloud functionality?
So when you're in Canvas, which is really the learning management system that a lot of our middle and upper grades will use, you actually can have a microphone piece that if I were to put in directions for an activity, it can actually read the directions for them. It can read different charts and things like that. So usually you're building in that option that a student can click it if they want to hear the directions.
So we're not necessarily talking about the screen reader functionality.
Right.
Because that's
it depends. Now it depends. A teacher can build activities within Canvas where they actually put that in, right? But it's really, that's what you're talking about is it's reading the text. Now, in the end of grade, it will not read your answer choices for you, right? But it can read part of a paragraph. It can read an entire paragraph. It can read a word. So it's just getting kids used to kind of getting comfortable with how much do they want something read to them and how much support do they want.
On the EOG, will it read the choices too?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Will not read the answer choices. Is that correct? Text, but or charts.
So it's mostly for the prompts.
Yeah.
Got you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hold on. Mr. Craig, hit your mic again. Is he on? You next,
Okay.
Mr. Henry.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't think, well, we can't overemphasize, if they can use this at the end of the year, that it's got to be used during the year.
Absolutely.
Now, don't want to add work to teachers, don't want to add work to principals, but if you go through all year and don't use this read aloud and come up and give the test and say, okay, now we can do it, that's going to affect children.
Right.
That's just like there was a time we used calculators. Well, you're not getting this calculator during the year, but you can get it on the test.
Right.
It's a problem. That's a problem. So whatever has to be done with these, the accommodation, or if it's what's being required now that you can read, they definitely need to be, I'm saying starting it now. It does not need to, like I say, happen in May, because it will affect children. Anytime you make a little change on a test, it
Absolutely.
affects. So
yep.
that's
Absolutely.
just my point.
Dr. Dallas.
Yes, sir.
For clarity, for understanding too, for our parents, when you say a click, is that an audio program built in our curriculum that will read aloud? Or is this where the teachers got to read aloud?
No. This is actually digital, right? It would be a function like with ClassWorks. It's a function that's built in and actually is like a little microphone, and the student would click it so that they could hear what was being read. And it would be very similar. It's not the teacher reading it most times. Now it can be, right?
So each
Because that
child-
is a feature we can use. A teacher can read to it, but on the end of grade, because we're on online, it would be a digital. It will be a click of like a little icon that will prompt it to be read.
Is that on an individual student base?
Yes, sir.
So that would not interrupt the entire class?
No, they'll be
But-
wearing headphones.
So what is the concern now, or is there a concern of keeping everybody on at the same page?
They don't have to be, right? So if I'm logged into my device and I'm taking an assessment, just like now, I might be on number 3, she might be on number 8. They don't have to stay because I'm on my own device. I have my headphones, so I'm working at my pace. So I might want to hear a word read 3 times, right? For Dr. Carr, she's moving on. So it is self-paced. And that's why we do want to make sure students use it so they get comfortable. Some kids will want it all read. Some kids are only going to need certain words read. They have to practice that so they become proficient with it.
And it's going to be responsibility of the teacher to monitor the progression of each child.
Well, as far as the progression, they can monitor if it's being used. They can talk about how many students used it. What are they using it for? They can observe during assessments to kind of get a feel of who's using it maybe too much. But yeah, it's just an observation piece. And it'll be something that we have to teach kids how to manage, right? In the beginning, most times kids will want to probably click it all the time because that's what kids will do until they learn how to really use it as a tool to help them.
Mr. Chair, if I may, to Mr. Brewer's point, Cindy, any of you can answer the question. On our EOGs, EOCs, kids can take as much time as they want to. So there's no time limit on taking those assessments, correct? Mm.
I'm sorry. So yes, sir, they do have time, and most of the tests are 120 minutes with an extra extended 1 hour. With the test read aloud, to Mr. Craig's question that you had in reference to the online reading and practice. We have planned this year with our check-ins, we have the same utilization to have them use the read aloud for every check-in test for science and math. So we hope to have them ready by the EOG just in practicing that in addition to their curriculum and what they're doing on a daily situation. So yes, they do have time, 120 minutes. They do have extra time with an hour added in most tests.
Currently, as far as classworks, they've been using the feature on their own when they wanted to for the last 2 years. So kids are already accustomed to doing that type of feature. Eureka Math, it's literally a click of the button for us to turn it on for everybody. So a lot of this is just stuff that's already available, that's been there. It's just a matter of us turning a switch.
And our school test coordinators will be responsible for marking those SIQs for every test. And we'll go back and check to make sure that they're on, so that we're ready in that aspect.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we will have kindergarten staggered time. Kindergarten, staggered start time by Miss Wendy Dorsey Carr and Ms. Deborah Dallas.
So we are just providing an update with the staggered entry. We were asked to look at how many schools used it this year. So we had 9 schools that chose not to use staggered entry and 12 that did. So it was almost half-half as far as where they are as far as using staggered entry. Any other questions about it?
Mrs. Trey Britt?
Good for that information. My thing is, and I've spoken to a couple of y'all about it. My thing is we need to be consistent across the county. That's my big thing. If one is doing it, I think we all need to do it. And I did state other counties I had checked into, such as Bladen, Cumberland, and Columbus, they all use it, but I'm only one in this situation, but I would support the staggered start. I think that's what the teachers want based off the emails and stuff I've got. Unless anybody else gives any information, I'll be willing to listen to it as well.
Mr. Terry?
So you stated that some schools chose to have a staggered start and others didn't. Is that typically a school decision or a district decision?
So we made that a school decision, just like we did last year. It was a school decision for a school to decide if they wanted to do staggered or if they wanted to do not staggered for kindergarten.
So is it typically around the state, is it typically a school decision or a district decision?
Normally, in my experience, it's been a school decision because you don't have a policy that dictates that, and we wouldn't need such a policy anyway. We can really make that decision all or none, but we'll have that conversation with principals.
Mr. Henry Brewer and Ms. Christie.
I think the concern is that we may get to the point that somebody in our association will make the decision that we're not going to stagger. I think traditionally we've done the staggered process, and there's a lot of benefits I've heard from having the staggered process. So continuing to give schools that option, I think is going to be the key in the future.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and Wendy and Dr. Carr, if you would explain why some districts have moved away from the staggered time. Historically, there was a need, but that no longer exists. And this is probably a 10-year, if not longer. Share that with the board, please.
I would say traditionally, kindergarten often would stagger because of the beginning of the year assessments that were required to be given to our students. So it was easier for a teacher to manage when I had to do assessments like NC Eli used to have to be done right away. There would be a beginning of the year math or reading assessment that was one-on-one that had to be given right away. But those assessments no longer have to be given day 1 or day 2, day 3, right? We don't start amplified testing until 6 or 7 days later. Eli is 30 days. So the need to kind of have one-on-one assessment up front is not quite what it used to be, which is why a lot of districts kind of saw that as really the main reason. And actually too, sometimes for parents, it's a little bit confusing. I bring them Monday, but I don't bring them Tuesday. I come back Wednesday, and kids were actually coming both days anyways. So I think that's why you might have seen some kind of come off of that. But it's a practice, right? It's something that is comfortable to a lot of people, which is why I think it's kind of been able to sustain itself.
And our average class size for kindergarten?
Yep. So average class size is usually around 18, if not smaller than that. And our kindergarten classrooms do have a teacher assistant. So looking at usually a 1-to-10 ratio, if not less than that, a 1-to-9 ratio. So being able to manage that on the first day, if I have 2 adults, is usually much more practical.
I think Ms. Crystal, then you, Dr. Emmanuel. Hit your button. All right.
My question is, are we asking the teachers, the kindergarten teachers, or is it just the principals? Are we asking them how they, feel with it?
Originally, when we met, it was with the principals, when we had this conversation with them last year prior to the 23-24 school year.
So could we possibly see where their minds are at with it too? Just because I've had some teachers come to me saying that they like the staggered just to kind of have that one-on-one time at the beginning, just to kind of meet certain, the kids. So just a thought.
Yep. Thank you.
We made the assumption, which we probably should not have done, that principals were having that conversation. This conversation alerted us that that's not the case. So to your point.
Dr. Emmanuel, then Mr. Craig, then we're gonna move on.
You talked about the numbers, 18. You might need to check Magnolia's enrollment in kindergarten. Also, you also might need to check if there's a program where they start their placement. I'm not talking about beginning of the year. You might need to check that out.
Yeah, that's with L. They go ahead and assess.
The placement, yeah, they do a placement.
Right.
So, and I like Ms. Monroe's idea of that, bring the teachers in and listen to their thoughts, because you will not believe the phone calls I think that all of us got, not just maybe 1 or 2, all of us got phone calls. Thank you.
No problem. Mr. Curry?
I think part of the problem this year is like it was right before school started, or the week school started, we started, okay, we're staggering, we're not staggering. And that led to confusion countywide about what we were going to do. And I think something was put out that we would do this year, and it would or would not be staggered. So the only thing I would say, and I like, me personally, I like the staggered, but I would say checking with teachers, checking with principals, do it, and let's announce it in May and June. This is what we're doing, not wait till July, and then we had to continue to announce it, but make a decision. This is the way we're going to go with it, and get it out there so people will know. And I'll agree, it's confusing if we got school A doing staggered and school B not staggering. That gets confusing. But if that's what it's going to be, whatever, let's get it announced out there so the public knows.
All right. Thank you. Next on the list, we have 2023-2024 district data by Ms. Wendy Dorsey Carr, Ms. Deborah Dallas.
Okay, so good evening again. As we move into this data presentation, we did want just to remind everyone of the North Carolina accountability model and the school performance grade formula. So in order to determine a school performance grade, it is based on an 80-20 formula, which means each school receives an achievement score. 80% of that achievement score goes into the school performance grade, and 20% of the growth, each school gets a growth score, 20% of that goes into the school performance grade. So basically they're taking 80% of the achievement, adding it to the 20% of the growth. That gives you a percentage, which then converts to a letter grade. And that's how our schools do receive a letter grade, from an A to an F. So this process, or this kind of accountability model, has been in place in North Carolina since 2013. So it started at large where it was just based by school. And now, as you've seen over the years, they've given it now by reading, by math, and they're looking at making it more granular so that you can see the performance of each. Yes. We were going to just go through a couple things, but do you want to now? We'll get there. Okay. So basically with the school performance grade, really looking at kind of the inequity of it being 80% proficient versus the 20% growth. That has been an ongoing debate in North Carolina amongst a lot of educational stakeholders, saying that really in order to be fair, it should be a 50-50 model, right? I should be able to take 50% of my proficiency and 50% of my growth, as opposed to over-relying on proficiency and taking 80%. So when we kind of look at our numbers, we get the 80-20, but we also look at our numbers as if we could operate under a 50-50 model. And when we work our numbers under a 50-50 model, we would have actually had 2 A schools, 3 Bs, 15 Cs, 16 Ds, and 0 Fs, if we were able to actually implement a 50-50 model. Next slide. So over the years, there's been several bills and things that have been tried to basically change the formula. None of them have really taken hold, so that we do operate still under an 80-20. But when you think about it, an 80-20 is really proficiency, and proficiency is really based on one day, a test score that a student earns on one day. And then often we'll oversimplify school quality because we don't look at things like climate and attendance, graduation, and things like that. So as we go into the data, we want you to know when we look at school performance grades, there are a lot of indicators that go into place. So at the elementary and the middle school levels, you can see all of the data, the indicators that go into making their school performance grade. And then when you look at the high school, you can see that they also have EOCs, but they also have some other measures. They have things like a 4-year graduation rate. They have EL progress. They have growth and NC, the math rigor. So high school has a couple different indicators that they use, but we just wanted to make sure you know everything that goes into actually getting to that school performance grade.
And Dr. Dallas, Dr. Carr, you want. So North Carolina is operating on the really 2 accountability models. One is from DPI, and the school performance grade is from the General Assembly, correct?
Yes, and actually when you think about it, 3, because you have federal guidance also under ESSA, which is your CSI and TSI. So when you think about it, it's really falling under 3 different models.
So what we wanted to do is take a minute to really show what the state is doing when we think about pandemic recovery, right? So looking at where were schools, and this is the state report for math, where was the school the states as a whole prior to the pandemic, and how far have they recovered? So if we look at, for example, 3rd grade, they are 97% recovered back to where they were pre-pandemic. If we look at 4th grade, they're 98% recovered back to where they were prior to the pandemic. And you'll see that trend in 5th and then 6th, 7th, and 8th. You'll see how far they've come as far as recovery back to prior to the pandemic. So that line is where they're trying to reach by the end of, get back up to where they were prior to the pandemic. So this is a state, but now if we look at the district, in 3rd grade, you see what we did is a little different. We put what percentage we were at pre-pandemic and where we are now, and so what percent recovery. So you'll see we're at 98% recovery for 3rd, 90% recovery for 4th, 89% recovery for 5th, 86% recovery for 6th, 70% recovery for 7th, and 118% or reaching above where we were prior to the pandemic. We know we saw a dip in 7th grade as far as the rate that they were progressing, because we did implement the 7-8 curriculum this year, which is a brand new curriculum for the 7th grade. ELA, the state did not create the same pre-pandemic chart, so we still did that to look at. We do want to recognize that this is on 2 different editions of the assessment. So there was a 4th and a 5th edition. So what you'll see is the same similar trend. You see that in 5th and 8th, we've already reached where we were pre-pandemic. And then in 4th, we're getting really close. And the rest that we're making the progress towards to getting back to where we were prior to the pandemic. This is, the state did have a science one. And so you can see the same trends in science, that in 5th grade, they were 91% recovered. In 8th, 89% recovered. And you'll see in the district, we are 76% recovered in 5th and 88% recovered in 8th. Then you'll see at the high school EOCs, you'll see in biology, the state recovered by to 90% recovery, English 2, 100%, Math 1, 90%, in Math 3, 123%. When we look at ours, we've come back above where we were with English 2. Math 1, we are at 64%. Math 3, we did not have the conversion that the state had done for Math 3, so we couldn't do the comparison. In biology, we're at 110% or above where we were pre-pandemic. And so the one thing we did talk about with Math 1 is that now we have a lot of kids that take it in 8th grade because of level 4s and 5s are required to take it. And we had some schools that started taking it. So we have less students taking it that were not already proficient in 9th grade. So some overall highlights when we think about our data. So grade level proficiency moved from 35.9% to 63.3%. Our math grades 3-8 improved from 33.2% to 35.6%. Our math 3 improved from 42.5% to 47.1%. 8th grade math went from 57.5% to 59%. English 2 had a modest gain of 38.6% to 39.4%. And then L progress went from 17.8 to 20.8. And then our 4-year graduation rate went up from 79.2 to 83.4. Any questions before I get into the next piece of the data on the pre-pandemic? So before we look at the data sheet that you have in front of you.
Dr. Emmanuel?
I'm just waiting for her to get to what everyone will look at us on met and not met and the letter grade. I'm waiting for her to get to that section.
Okay, I don't think we got there yet. We're coming there yet. Do you got a question right now, Ms. Christie? Ms. Christie?
So let's go back a few slides right here. So we talk about overall grade level proficiency, 35.9 to 36.3. That's not fascinating to me. So I'm just trying to understand how that's a highlight.
Because we're continuing the growth pattern that we need to increase proficiency. So what we're looking at is how do we start increasing proficiency and not rely so much on growth. And so what you'll see is that we're starting to increase proficiency and getting back up where we need to be.
But you didn't even really go a full point. So, I mean, I'm gonna need you to break that down for me because that doesn't look, none of that looks impressive to me. I can't see what you see as a highlight.
So these pieces really show, so in a few minutes when we look at the other chart, you'll see specific areas where we have specific schools that we know that we have to target. As a whole district, we saw the proficiency increase. We saw growth, and what we know is that we have to have more 4s and 5s. So we have to keep that proficiency stable. And Dr. Dallas can talk about that. We also have to think about a J curve, right? We've put new things in place. It takes time, and we have to have certain things stay steady so that we can start going up.
Well, I need to understand why we had 7th and 8th grade math in the same grade in the same year, and we expected them to do well.
So 7th and 8th grade math is now trying to help bolster them. So it is a new year and it's new curriculum. It takes time for everybody to build the understanding. But what we find is as they learn that curriculum, it will help them with Math 1, Math 2, Math 3.
But you gave them 7th and 8th grade math in 7th grade.
Yes. It's a compacted curriculum. So it reduces the amount of content and compacts to the key points that they need to learn in order to be proficient.
So what did you do for the students who didn't do well, which was the majority of them? How are they going to fare in 8th grade this year?
The same, what we usually do with those plans is we literally look at, just like with any data point, is looking at where particular gaps are so that we can incorporate that into the next grade level. So looking at where those gaps were and providing that support for those pieces. So it might be intervention, it might be tutoring during the day. It varies based on those pieces, and using tools such as Apex and different tools that we have to fill in those gaps. So low performing school is any school that has a D or F and did either met or did not meet expected growth. Okay, just so that you kind of have an idea when we go through this data sheet. And then what you'll see is CSI low performing is the lowest 5% in the state. And I will say, when we look at our data in a few minutes, this is a list no school could be removed from this year. They decided that they would wait one more year before they would look at their data to determine if they can come off the list. CSI low graduation rate, we did not have any schools, but that is a high school that has graduation rates lower than 66.7%. TSI continues to underperforming is any school with one or more same subgroup receiving a grade of F. And if we talk about this, it's over the most recent previous 2 years. What we see across the state, this is the majority of the schools in the state, and it's usually for students with disabilities. TSI additionally targeted support means that this subgroup performs lower than the highest CSI overall. And so we did have some schools that we'll talk about, and this was a group that could come off the list based on where their targets were, okay? So to the sheet that you do have in front of you, we're gonna go line by line and talk about it, and then kind of try to help answer any questions that you may have.
And then, Dr. Carr, before we take a look at that, I want to go back to Ms. Fields' question and concern. What we're not sharing tonight is the historical data. And we invite the board members to meet one-on-one so we can share all the information. Once you take a look at the historical data, then you're going to realize why that's a highlight, how we close those gaps versus where they used to be, those numbers, in a short period of time, improving at a faster rate than the state. So again, we hope after tonight, you'll schedule with them and sit down one-on-one. But we're not sharing the historical data that in a lot of cases was single digits.
So I'm going to start with the top. I think everybody should have the large sheet in front of them. And so we'll look at Deep Branch. Last year in 23, previous year, they were met, negative 1.97 index and F. This year they're met, and you'll see an improved index of 0.82, and now they're a D. They're still considered low performing because of MET. They did raise a grade level. SPG. East Robeson exceeded at 6.34, was a B. They continued to exceed this year at 7.01 and an RA, and so they went up a letter grade. Fairgrove Elementary met 1.26 is a D. They continue to meet, negative 1.83 D. Low performing, as I said, CSI, they could not come off of that list, so they continue being CSI. Fairmont High was not met last year at negative 4.10 D. This year they met at negative 1 D, and they're still considered low performing. I'm sorry.
Hello, Dr. Mann, got a question. Turn your mic on, Dr. Mann.
Stay in each line.
Okay.
Okay, and somebody else may have direct questions that go along with this. Do you mind addressing it like that? Because I believe we all understand each line.
Okay.
Y'all, am I saying wrong?
No, that's fine.
I think everybody understands each line, but my question is with the whole. Okay, and it's general questions. May I ask those questions, Mr. Chair?
It's considered, yes, it's good. Dealing with.
And I apologize for jumping the gun earlier. Will you forgive me?
You can.
Is it okay with the board if we just ask general questions about the whole sheet?
Correct. It's good.
Because I believe we understand each line.
Good idea.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, my general question, just glancing, I glanced 7 schools in elementary that had met last year and didn't meet this year. Okay, just glancing, I might be wrong. And I do want to say those schools, going back to your report on another section, that met the pandemic and that are growing, that's a good thing. They're not growing fast enough, but they're growing. Okay, but I want to switch to this. What do you feel is going on with those schools that had met last year, but then this year didn't meet? What have you dug into, and what is your analysis of what happened? Because the general public's going to judge us on this, not necessarily about what the pandemic, our growth in the pandemic, because some of them, I think, maybe you all know, they have no idea about the pandemic chart. They're going to grade us on, are we A, B, C, D, they would meet, it would not meet. This is what the public knows us for, I think. And this is no fault of yours. Please don't take it personally. I'm just asking, have you had a chance to look at what happened? We have 7 schools that met or exceeded and then went down and did not meet. So what have you been able to gather that happened?
I would first start by saying, coming off of last year, some of our projections for our students were higher than what they typically are. Because last year we had a good growth year, which means the projections for those students are higher, right? So if we don't teach to that higher level, unfortunately, our students don't continue to grow at that higher level. So that's one area, right, is making sure that the teachers are teaching at that rigorous level. But our projections were higher. Kids were supposed to come in and perform and grow more than what they had before. And when you have a higher baseline, it was a challenge for some of our teachers. I would also say, based on when we went through and kind of looked at each school, in some cases, you can drill it down to 1 or 2 classrooms. You can drill it down to a classroom or a grade level. So when you start looking at that, we start looking at vacancies, we start looking at our teacher capacity, we start looking at a lot of things. But when we take a school and we say they didn't meet, we have to look at it grade level by grade level, right? Content, and then we have to start looking at how each classroom performed. And in some cases, we're able to drill those losses down to a couple of classrooms.
So you do not think, may I continue just a couple of questions?
Continue.
So you do not think it had anything to do with the curriculum? Because I've been asked that, because there were whispers got out about this, from teachers. Do you think, are you satisfied with our curriculum, E and Eureka?
Yes. So one of the things we did look is, because this, when the SPG comes out, it's the growth plus the proficiency. What we saw is 28 of the schools maintained or increased their achievement. So without the growth, they actually went up in achievement, which is a positive that shows that we're getting more kids proficient, but not necessarily at the rate, like you talked about, Dr. Manuel, that we need to, so that we can keep on having that high growth.
But do you understand our concern? This is what the public
Right.
and parents grade us on when they see that school is an F or a D. That's, they throw us in the wash right then. And this is what I'm thinking about, and I'm sure others are. This is what we're judged on this sheet right here. And just looking at this, and we have 2 A's, but it's a school. One school has 1 grade, and the other school is early college, and we can understand why they have an A. But then to look at the other, I think we're going to have some good conversation as to what we're going to tell our parents and what we're going to do to change this. We need a plan. And I think talking deep in the data, I'm not sure that parents understand what we just went through with the growth that we had before the pandemic and after. Maybe they will. Maybe I don't mean to sell them short, but we need a definite plan to communicate to everyone how we're going to get out of this, because I think we're smarter than what this is showing. I'm sorry.
And I can just speak to, we've already started having conversations with principals right? I know we've started already having data dives with each of our schools and looking at the data so we can identify where was the loss, what was the impact, and then what are our next steps. So we've already started doing that with our schools, and we've started actually having cabinet meetings. We go out and we've started talking to the principals, their entire ILT, and starting talking about a concrete plan that has to be put in place in order to change the trajectory of some of the schools.
I know these schools are disappointed. I know how they take it seriously, the principals and the teachers. I'm sorry it took so much time.
All right, Mr. Terry, then Mr. Craig.
When I look at, just going back to what Ms. Christie was asking about, doing some comparisons, I guess, maybe between last year and this year, or looking at the historical piece, when I sort of went down a rabbit hole last week when this data came out and started doing some analysis, and I really just got into grade level performance. In grade level performance comparison from last year to this year, and then filtering it down by school. And one of my concerns is when you look at how the schools are classified within DPI system, we've got elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. If we look at the GOP difference between last year and this year, the high schools were the widest gap between the lowest high school and the highest high school was like 21%. In terms of the change from last year to this year. For example, Red Springs went down 13%, while Lumberton High School went up 8%. That's in grade level proficiency by school. Then when you go over to middle school, that gap grows. Instead of it being 21%, it then goes to 41%. So in middle schools, you've got the biggest, the school that dropped the most was Orem, which was 14% in terms of grade level performance. And the school that went up the highest was Red Springs Middle, which was 33%. Okay, so that's a 47% gap between the lowest and the highest. But then when you go to elementary schools, my question is, there's a 56% gap between the lowest elementary school and the highest elementary school. Townsend increased grade level performance from last year to this year 36%, right? While St. Paul's Elementary went down 20%. That's a 56% gap. So my question is, are we thinking about those gaps and trying to figure out, okay, well, what did they do at Townsend that they didn't do at St. Paul's? And all of this is public information. It's all out on DPI's website, but you just have to know how to go in and manipulate it. So what are we doing to sort of find out what the schools that were successful, what they done versus the ones that didn't perform quite as well, and trying to have that cross-pollination, I guess, of ideas and really be innovative about how we address, just like what Dr. Emmanuel was asking.
Let me answer that question. When you look at this data, one of the things you will notice, so we had 8 schools that changed a letter grade that went up. Those 8 schools is where we really focus and monitor more than some of the other schools based on the previous year of growth, having that high growth. Now, once that high growth happened, and I'll be honest, our real concern was that we know the prediction was going to be higher. And so our hope was that we wouldn't take that much of a drop, and we really held on. What's interesting, though, is we also had 8 schools that went down. And so part of our plan is already in place is how do we increase the monitoring in classrooms in every building? You know, the ongoing conversation that our principals are instructional leaders, we're pushing that to happen even more. We've added some additional central office staff that will help us get in the buildings. And so at the end of the day, 8 up, 8 down is a concern, but it's the issue of monitoring. How do we get more coverage in classrooms? And we work with principals on that. When those gaps, and like looking at the whole 52, it depends. There's a lot of issues that determine how kids are performing. And what we really pay attention is that index, that growth. Is that getting wider? Are we closing that gap? And That's what the information we need in terms of how do we approach that school? How do we support that school that we can stop that index slide if that's happening? But the issue is monitoring. How do we get in, not the curriculum, because we said it over and over, all curriculums are basically the same. All of them are moving towards the applied curriculum, hands-on, which is a different way of teaching. We feel like we are a little bit ahead because of the L curriculum, which is an applied curriculum, and Eureka, which is an applied curriculum, and now the science is also. And so we have those things in place already. To close gaps takes a long time. I wish the numbers was higher, not making an excuse that, again, we started with the 50-50 because on the 80-20, I'm sorry, the 80-20 works against high poverty districts. We all know that. Anytime you put a greater weight on proficiency than growth, that you don't value growth, that's a problem. It's going to work against you, not making an excuse. But what we also look at, how are we trending? How are we trending? And we're trending north. We're going up. Is it going to happen overnight? No. But we're getting there. So we feel good about where we are, what we're doing. The original plan was it would take 5 years, and what we're looking at in terms of the increase in proficiency, and then we think at year 5, next year, we'll be where we need to be. Are we disappointed that there's some schools that should not have been on and dropped a letter grade? I've already met with those principals, made it clear the law says if that happens again, we're going to have to move you as a principal. I've had those conversations, so they understand that. You know, this is a work in progress.
Mr. Craig, Ms. Christian.
Several things, and I know nobody's listening from DPI, and Mr. Bobby knows this. I won't, and Ms. Lewis, so I won't labor it too much, but please change that 80-20 in the next 20 years. Like I said, nobody's probably listening. When you can sit in here and we can talk about this growth was 36.2 and it went to 36.7, and I have a problem sometimes understanding that, and the public does. I'm gonna go like now, if you like Mr. Terry, he can dive into this stuff and he can understand it. The public looks at this, and like Dr. Manuel said, they see a letter grade of F, they see a letter grade of D, and that's basically what they see. And that's what we get judged on. So, you know, whatever we can do to get that from that, because that's basically all they see. Now there's 4 on here, and I'm doing this for me and when the public sees it. I counted 4 schools, and this might be with performance, but I just asked the question. We got 4 schools here that met growth the last 2 years, but their letter grade's a F. So just share real quick how, okay, our school met growth for 2 years in a row, but our letter grade is an F. And I counted at least 4 schools in that category. So before I go any farther, if you would
So,
share
Mr. Craig,
that.
that really plays to the idea of 80% proficiency and 20% growth. So even though in those schools, our kids are growing a year for a year's worth of instruction, because growth is only valued at 20%, you don't get enough movement to get your performance score to a 55 to be a C, right? So that goes back to that 80-20. Is growth is great, but at the end of the day, proficiency is going to be what moves you to a letter grade, right? Because it's got more value in that formula, unfortunately.
And that's the reason, you know, I'm saying when we're talking to the public, we need to be talking a lot in these letter grades, because these numbers and percentages, we can show them, but we need to talk about the letter grades and explain what's going on here. Because like Dr. Manuel said, and we've seen, you know, when we drop in letter grades, they want to know why, or we want to know why, what's going on, why we drop in letter grades. So whatever can be stated and whatever can be done to correct that. And now, and I'm going to add this. I know we got teachers in the room. I know we got principals coming around. And I can make more comments about that. You monitor, you know, you monitor and use as much as you can. But sometimes, You can monitor, and my opinion is it just don't help. You can keep working, so sometimes it might have to be other things. And I know we've said with our curriculums that teachers can bring in, and I'm saying this so people hear, teachers can bring in other things that can help with that curriculum. They are allowed to do that. So there was confusion that they couldn't do it, but we said they can, as long as it's aligned with the, I think, standard course and what the state saying that we're testing, things can be brought in, which that's where your veteran teachers that might have a lot of material can be bringing stuff in. So making sure they understand that can be done.
Well, let's clarify and
Man, help
qualify
me
that
out.
now. They can't go on a website and purchase teachers
No.
because it's not aligned to the standards.
Right.
So when we say those kinds of things, we need to be clear, right? What they have in terms of the scripted curriculum is they have the ability to modify that as long as they continue to teach the standards. That's the issue.
Yeah, right.
Now, so the other piece of data I had them to take a look at, how many of our kids miss proficiency by 1, 2, or 3 points? Share that, because that's important. Again, our conversation is we're progressing to where we need to be, and we will get there over time.
So when we actually refigured school performance grades to determine if we had all the kids that just were 1, 2, or 3 points away, which is 1 or 2 questions, we were actually going to have 19 C schools. So if that kind of gives you an idea, it would have been 2 A's, I think 2 B's, 19 C's, and then a handful of D's and maybe 1 or 2 F's. I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but the majority of our schools would actually be C schools.
15 of our
Or
schools would have moved
been
up 11
whatever grade. And so we know how close our students are because that tells you if we could capture those students that are just 1 or 2 questions away, this data would look completely different. And so helping teachers and principals understand their data to know how do you help those students that are right on the cusp. And we're getting many more students that are right on that cusp of almost getting that passing score. And it's literally that close.
Ms. Krista Monroe, then we're gonna do Mr. Terry, then we're gonna move on.
This just kind of aligns back to what you had mentioned, Dr. Williamson, about the second year, if they get an F, then you have to move them. But like, why couldn't, and I don't know where the rules are of all this, but why do we have to wait that far? Why do we have to wait 2 years for it to get that bad to do something about it? Because now you're 2 years deep of it not being well, where to kind of grab it while it's starting to get bad before waiting. And now you have 2 years to catch up to.
Right, right. One, there's a law that spells out in terms of performance when we have to replace a principal. Of course, the board, with the recommendation from the superintendent, always has a right to do it earlier than that.
Okay.
And we've had some of those conversations. But again, we're clear with some administrators already. If we don't turn now, we're gonna make a change.
Mr. Terry, we're gonna move.
I think the way that we progress and move forward is not going to be through an approach that says, if you don't do better, we're going to move you. I think it should be more about let's work together to move these students forward. What can this district provide to help you move these students? What can we as a board do to better support you? We've got to approach these professionals with the language of encouragement, and you've got to have a coaching language, is the terminology that's used in instructional design, which that's my day job. So in instructional design, we don't look at a course and say this course is no good, fix it. We look at a course and say, okay, there may be some opportunities to strengthen this section or these modules or these objectives. So provide individuals with the information they need and coach them to move toward improvement, rather than approaching these professionals with the language of, if you don't do better, we're going to move you, because that's never going to work. Thank you.
Yeah, let me correct. What I said was the law dictates. that. Okay, let's be clear. And you made reference to coaching. That was why we adopted the turnaround model of relay, and talk about that, because a strong part of that, every principal that needs coaching, they have an academic coach assigned to them, who is either Dr. Dallas or Dr. Clark. We talk about the coaching part, because you're absolutely right, Ms. Terry.
So based on the current needs, we looked at the schools and divided those up to provide coaching to the different schools. So we have 5 of us that are coaching the principals and the entire instructional leadership team to help support them based on what the data shows. So we have been sitting down with each school over the last couple weeks and looking at their data and saying, for example, one school said we looked at their data and noticed it was specifically one teacher, one grade level, one subject that created that large gap for them. So how do we support that teacher and coaching them to be better? Or if that's not the right fit, is there a different grade level they need to teach? So those are the conversations we are currently having with each of our schools, is sitting down so we can determine what created the gap, what's causing those gaps in your school. And each school on here, we could tell you for each school what specifically created that gap. It could be vacancies, depending on, like we had a school where most of the teachers in one grade level were subs. So we know what the impact was, and how do we help those students, knowing that that group of students is now in the next grade level and had a year of subs. So those are the plans that we are sitting down and getting together with each individual principal and instructional leadership team to determine what their needs are, because we know every building has different needs. So we can't say from the district, Mr. Terry, you're getting this, Ms. Crystal, you're getting this, the same thing, because we know each building has some different needs or subject areas where they're struggling. We also think about, when we're coaching, what are additional supports we can put in place to help them. So adding additional supports, like looking at the curriculum supervisors, like if we know math was a real struggle and you have a lot of new teachers, how can our math supervisor help build that skill set in your building? And so that's how we work together, and we meet on a regular basis with them and model for them in the schools, working with them with teachers or whatever they need based on those particular needs.
All right, Ms. Christie, then we'll come back to you. She's been ready to speak for one.
I just want to note that the schools that are doing well, they are teaching the curriculum, but they're using it as a supplement. We all know that. And I don't understand why, as a district, we're not moving forward and implementing that at every school to make us successful.
That should not be happening. And the curriculum, the core curriculum approved by this board is not a supplemental curriculum. And so we have a principal meeting on the 19th. One of the things that I'm gonna talk about is ineffective practices within our building, but also private practices. Those principals that allow those teachers in the buildings to pick and choose what they teach. One of our problems is that we never cover within a year the full curriculum. It's the pacing of the lessons to that. But our core curriculum is not a supplemental curriculum.
Mr. Terry, then we're going to move on. The last question.
So you said something earlier, Dr. Carr, and just help me as a board member to be able to answer this question. So if I have you mentioned something about long-term subs. If I'm out in the community and a parent walks up to me and says, my child is in a room with a long-term sub, why are there certified teachers serving as academic coaches or in non-teaching or non-full-time teaching positions within the school when my child is in the room with a full-time sub? So if you don't mind, just help me to help me answer that question in a way that's going to satisfy that individual, to show that value for these certified professionals circulating throughout the building while their child, which that's the one that they're concerned about, is in a room with a full-time sub.
Let me answer that question. So, and Jamal chime in, a high percentage of our teachers are lateral entry teachers, which is great, doing outstanding. They bring those world experiences to the positions. A lot of our teachers that come in through, they're missing the educational classes that they need. And so we said one of our great needs is how do we increase monitoring and support for those teachers who need a lot? It is by way of the academic coaches that we're able to get that coverage, and they're really having a positive impact. The other part of that, and every opportunity, appreciate the board placing an assistant principal in every building so that we can hold the principal at a higher accountability level in terms of being the academic coach. But to answer your question, which is a valid, great question, is that's how we supporting new and beginning teachers in our buildings that otherwise would be on their own.
And just to support what Dr. Williamson said, we've seen the need overall for our teachers. As Dr. Williamson mentioned, we're seeing less teachers have the educational background, that pedagogy classes they will take in undergrad. And so as a district, we have to make sure we support them because they're doing teaching real time. And so we need to have someone at the school, in addition to the principal, and assistant principal. Our academic coaches are literally serving as mentors and those one-on-one supports for those beginning teachers. So that's a great need that we have to have. In addition to our academic coaches, we also have our BT sessions that happen each month. That's an additional support that we have for our beginning teachers. So the need is there. That is why we have those academic coaches in those buildings to actually be thought partners with those teachers to understand those curriculum, because they need some support in that area as well to break it down for them as well. So that's the need that is there, and that's why we have our academic coaches in each building. That has been a great service, especially for all those young teachers. And I would even take a step further, even to our veteran teachers as well, that they're supporting them as well. So the need is there, and so we're thankful for academic coaches in our buildings.
Mr. Chair, if I can, one other point, and this is directed again to Dr. Carr and Dr. Dallas. I'm encouraged because when I take a look at historically the number of subgroups that did not meet or exceed growth, in a lot of our buildings now, that's down to one subgroup. Well, that's a powerful indicator of how we're trending. And a high percentage of there's only one subgroup that did compared to historically what it's been, correct?
And most of it is, but they are moving, is students with disabilities. So that is still the subgroup, but you will see, like if you noticed on our sheet, we had 12 TSI-AT schools, which is what the state really looks at when we think about subgroups. And we had 6 we were able to move off of that list because of the targeted support they received in those schools.
Thank you. Next, we will have public comments, and we have one, Ms. Amy Bullard. Ms. Amy Bullard. She's here. Let's go. She'll move on.
Yes.
All right. She's not here. Next on the agenda, we have action items and special policy updates by Mr. Henry Brewer, Mr. Bobby Locklear.
So good evening again, Chairman Leach, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. Our policy committee met on September the 3rd, and we reviewed all of our special policy updates as it related to the new implementation of Title IX. There are at least 2 policies that need to be repealed, and we also have other policies that have minor or either complete rewrites. It is the recommendation of the policy committee that we approve, or that you approve, all of the policies that were included in the special policy update.
Mr. Craig?
I'll make a motion.
Have been motioned on the floor by Mr. Craig Lightly to approve the policy updates, and have been seconded by Melissa Ocean. The policy updates. No, I mean Mr. Craig Larry, I'm sorry. Lord, my fault. A motion's been made by Mr. Craig Larry, a second been by Ms. Melissa Ocean. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Was it Melissa?
All right, now we got Mr. Bible Life, RCC request for surplus buses.
Good evening again. Ms. Singler, president at RCC, has requested that we donate 4 inoperable buses over to her facility. And these buses would be used, 2 for her police training, 2 in the fire training. And the buses that we would donate to them, 2, as we spoke earlier, we had to drill a hole in the block for 2 of the buses at the DEQ. So 2 of those buses would come from that. And 2 of the other buses that we are asking permission to donate over to RCC or to make surplus and then donate to RCC. One, the transmission is gone, and the other has a cracked head. So we do have 4 buses that currently are inoperable we can donate over or turn into surplus and donate.
All right, there's been, Mr. Henry made a motion that we donate the bus to RCC, the surplus bus, and the second being by Melissa Ocean. All in favor? All opposed? Ayes got it. All right, the corrected easement of the old central office by Piedmont Gas by Mr. Bobby Locklear.
Okay, good evening again. I placed at your table or at your seat an updated easement to the Piedmont gas request over the old central office, and I will defer to Mr. Swartz to provide updates on this.
There were a number of drafts that went back and forth, 4 different drafts, I believe, that went back and forth on this, and were agreed to between Piedmont Natural Gas and the public schools of Robeson County. Somehow, I'm not sure how it happened, there was a redlined version of an earlier draft that ended up getting signed and sent to Piedmont, and Piedmont then filed it. So this is a correction of that. It's been agreed to by all parties, and the recorded draft version of the agreement will be eliminated by this, and the corrected provisions will be included. So we'd request the board to approve this.
Mr. Craig?
Yeah. I make a motion that we approve the updated version of the easement.
A motion being made by Mr. Craig Lowry to approve the updated version of the easement for Piedmont Natural Gas, and the second being by Ms. Melissa Ocean. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
All right, now we have RCC MOU by Dr. Wendy Dorsey Carr.
Good evening again, Chairman Leach, Superintendent Williamson, and board members. Tonight, I am requesting approval of the new memorandum of understanding with RCC. This is the basically the same memorandum we have had over the last 2 years with just minor technical changes and the names of the courses that have changed that we are receiving through RCC for our CCP.
Dr. Emmanuel?
I make a motion that we approve this memorandum of understanding with RCC.
Motion being made by Dr. Linda Emmanuel to approve the memorandum for RCC, and the second been made by Mr. Henry Brewer. All in favor? All opposed? Now we have fundraisers by Ms. Erica Setzer.
Good evening, Chairman Leach, Superintendent Dr. Williamson, and board members. I included in your packet the fundraisers from the schools that we have received so far and can answer any questions anyone has regarding those at this time.
Mr. John Simmons.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion's been on the floor to approve the fundraisers by Mr. John Simmons. There's been a second by Mr. Trey Beard. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you, Ms. Erica.
Thank you. Last thing is,
Monthly report by Ms. Erica Setzer.
Again, you'll find a monthly financial report in your packet, and I can answer any questions anyone has at this time.
Mr. Craig Lowry.
Sir, anything that's changed really
No,
from
sir.
last month?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll make a motion, we accept the monthly financial report.
A motion's been on the table by Mr. Craig Lowry to accept the monthly financial report. There's been a second by Mr. John Simmons. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Ms. Melissa? Hold on. Okay, hold on for 1 second, Melissa. Yes.
That's fine.
Okay. I would like to go back to the public comments. I think Miss Amy Bullard.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Chairman Leach, board members, I'm Amy Bullard. I'm a resident of Pembroke, North Carolina.
Excuse me.
I have,
Excuse me, Ms. Amy. I just like, you'll have 3 minutes, and we're gonna use the timer. You're gonna have 3 minutes to talk before the board. Step up to the mic.
okay, my concerns are bus shortage, our school bus driver shortage, and also the cancellation of out-of-school district students. As a concerned grandparent, I take my granddaughter to school every morning and I pick her up in the afternoon. And there's like 150 people at Pembroke Elementary. It is insane. I've actually got pictures on my cell phone. If you want to see them, I'll email them to you, some of them. And also the issue of cancellation of out-of-district students is terrible because there's circumstances for different people who may not be able to take their kids to school in the morning, may not be able to pick their kids up in the same district they live in. So that's a question that needs to be addressed also, because at one time I was one of those parents because I worked with the Department of Corrections. Getting at work at 5:15 in the morning, school doesn't start till 8 o'clock. So therefore that's an issue. So grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, neighbors are dropping kids off and picking kids off, inconveniencing a lot of people in the process. So those are two main issues that are concerning to me as a community resident and also as a grandparent and as a mom also who was in a situation like that. So those were the concerns that I had that I wanted to submit to this board for some kind of resolution. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Amy. Now we will have Ms. Melissa Ocean.
I move that the Board of Education for the Public Schools of Robeson County go into closed session for the purposes of discussing certified and classified personnel, North Carolina General Statutes 143, 318.11A1 and 6, and to consult with the attorney retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the Board of Education for the Public Schools of Robeson County, North Carolina General Statutes 143, 318.11A13.
That's right. All in favor? Let's go closed session.
Make a motion that we're approving the minutes, right? I make a motion to approve closed session minutes.
Come out of closed session.
Come out of closed session, I'm sorry.
We got a motion to come out of closed session by Ms. Melissa Ocean. We have a second by Mr. Trey Britt. All in favor? All right, all opposed? Ayes have it. We got a motion to approve closed session minutes. We got a motion by Mr. John Simmons. We got a second by Mr. Crystal Monroe. Ms. Crystal Monroe, all in favor? All opposed? We got a motion by Mr. John Simmons to approve personnel as presented. We got a second by Ms. Melissa Ocean. All in favor? All opposed? You got Mr. Terry, you got something?
I would like for us to schedule a curriculum committee meeting for next Thursday at 5:30. Just wanted to make that announcement.
Ms. Terry, let me check everybody's calendar and I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
All right. We got Mrs. Trey Britt.
FYI, Jessica sent everybody an email, but the Kiwanis Robertson of Lumberton Annual Banquet, they've invited anybody from PSRC cabinet and board members that want to come. Just need to RSVP if you would. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Henry Brewer.
So, like for you to remember appreciation and wonderful things, celebration with Farm Bureau, scheduled Tuesday, September the 17th at the Robeson County Farm Bureau office on 302 Bailey Road, Lumberton, North Carolina at 7 p.m.
All right. Go ahead.
I make a motion to adjourn.
There's been a motion by Ms. Melissa Oates to adjourn. There's been a second by Ms. Kristen Monroe. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.